Hey, students, this will be a short recorded lecture, and this is just on the countercultural movement, just because it kind of fits in between um, the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, Vietnam, and so forth. And so, the counterculture movement is a movement. Of course, I took this picture of people at Woodstock with the hippies and so forth. Or I didn't take this picture, but I found it online. So, what you see is this counterculture movement really had roots with the beatnik writers of the 1950s. And as they read these writers and so forth, you had people that kind of were challenging authority and challenging social norms and how they dressed and how they carried themselves and so forth. And so I want to emphasize that when we think of the 60s, we often think of the hippies because that's what we see in the movies and so forth. We can visualize it, but really, the counterculture movement was actually a minority group in the overall American culture and society of youth and teenagers and college age students and so forth. But still, it's a very important part of the society and culture of the 1960s. So, really, a growing number of young Americans embarked on a general revolution against authority, which is one key thing, and also middle class respectability. The hippie, attired in ragged blue jeans, tie-dye t-shirts, beads, and army fatigues with long, unkept hair, symbolized this new counterculture. Now, it's one of my favorite pictures of the 1960s, but I've always wondered what is on that guy's shirt and so forth. And so this is a group of hippies and so forth. Um, and so every time I see that guy's picture, it makes me laugh. But also, popular music helped define this counterculture. Artists like Pete Seeger and Bob Dylan and the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, and others represented this. Joan Baez and others. The Beatles came to the United States in 1964 and spawned a commercial and cultural phenomenon called Beatlemania. Now, this right here is a picture taken, aerial photograph of Woodstock on this guy's farm in upstate New York in 1969. And so I can't understate the importance of the Beatles. They have considered, probably the most popular music band in American history, even though they're British. And in fact, you'll notice a lot of musicians will say, "Who do they get their inspiration from?" And they'll list either artists or bands, and the Beatles are almost always mentioned. And they have such a tremendous impact on American culture. American youth's eager embrace of the Beatles deepened the generational divide between teenagers and their elders. And also, the Rolling Stone was huge at this time as well. And so here's some covers of different musical groups at this time, and you can see how these were kind of radically different than in the past. I mean, you look at the Beatles cover and so forth on the top right, and so forth. You see Carlos Santana down here in the bottom left, and so Rolling Stones were also a really big rock band. Of course, now you have Rolling Stone magazine. But also, one of the things that became very prominent was the use of recreational drugs, especially marijuana and the hallucinogenic, popularly known as LSD or acid, which is one of the most addicting and brain-altering drugs out there. For instance, just using it once can permanently alter your brain. In August of 1969, 400,000 young people were actually at Woodstock, and drugs were prominently used there, and so forth. And so they were getting high and listening to music and using drugs, and also sex was prominent at this 3-day Woodstock music and art fair. Also in 1967, 2 years before that, the Summer of Love began in San Francisco, New York, and Chicago, and young dropouts, drifters, and teenage runaways hung out where they were practicing sexual promiscuity without any kind of consequences and so forth. And that's part of this, what we call the sexual revolution that occurred. And their faith in instant love and peace quickly turned sour, however, as they suffered bad drug trips. Also, STDs were very prominent, which had permanent lasting consequences. Also, they encountered a lot of loneliness. So even though this hookup culture was popular, many of these people ended up desiring long-term relationships. And then also violence emerged. Oftentimes, where you have high drug use, you have violence that occurs. But still, the majority of American youth and college age students followed the norm. And so, even though we like to look at the hippies and the countercultural movement, really the majority of American youth and people in the young 20s, early 20s were following kind of the norms of you see from the 1950s.